and he would choose them, and he often read them, and then Keith Paquette and I would take the voice tape into the production studio at Co-op Radio and overlay music, which we would select for it, and it became another interesting thing to do, both in terms of creating something, building it up in terms of mood and voice and the proper tone of the music, because after all, radio is the theater of the mind.
In our early days, Bill Richardson was part of our programming group.
Bill
Did he
Richardson,
happen to come back for any of this during
yes, he
that
did.
time?
Yes, he read a couple of his stories of story. I should have thought Bill Richardson right off the bat. After all, he is one of our illustrious members now.
He got his start on the
He
coming
got
out
his
show.
start at Co-op Radio, and he's doing very well, and good for him. He is a very talented man. And I wanted, in many ways, the impossible dream to be all things to all groups. So the stories never stopped. You know, there was fun times, very busy times. I was involved with Co-op Radio and Coming Out Show for 10 years, and the first 5 was more or less the radio. And then something happened in around 1990, and Vancouver hosted the Gay Games. Gay Games 3, I think they were, the first 2 being in San Francisco. And this was the first time that the games had been in a country other than the U.S., and it was the beginnings, or supposedly the beginnings, of a long-standing, ongoing tradition of games every 4 years in various parts of the world, which more or less has happened. But back then, I thought this would be a great opportunity to broadcast the games as much as possible, both locally and around the world. And I'd already had made connections with a gay radio group in Los Angeles, who provided a syndicated news service, which we employed on our show, or aired on our show for weeks, almost the whole time I was there. And they were, of course, like an international clearinghouse, and they had news reports on events happening around the world. And so we struck up a deal where we would supply them with various audio clips from the various events and aspects of the games, which I must say was a very exciting, thrilling, and exhausting time, because there were several people came on board primarily for that particular endeavor. James Goodman was one. I'll come back to that, but there's about 3 or 4 other people joined, and we got a really cohesive group working, and we had to, because we covered the opening ceremonies in BC Place of the games. Lynn Lubbers, who was the woman, she and I did a play-by-play of the ongoing ceremony at BC Place for both the opening and the closing. And you have to think of logistics I never thought of before, which big broadcasting corporation like CBC would have in down pat. But you can't be at 2 places at once when you only have a certain amount of only one set of equipment. So what to choose? What kind of things are you going to include in your broadcast? Because I made an arrangement with Co-op Radio and took it to the board, and they approved that we would get special coverage rights each day of the broadcast day to broadcast some element of the Gay Games. And so we had a 9 o'clock report. We had a noon hour, 1 hour show. We had a 4 o'clock report, and then we had something again that night. And we were taking away time from other shows to do this. And, some were not too happy that we were. Some were supportive. Some said, why not? We don't have to worry about filling in our hour then. But, we were very, very grateful we got it. But it almost became a curse, because that 9 o'clock came every day, and that noon hour came every day, and the other times. And you had to have stuff either taped or interviews ready or whatnot to fill it all in. And we had a few shaky starts and times, but it was an exhilarating time. And I met media people from all over well, certainly all over North America, and from Europe, who came to report on the games. And to me, it reminded me of being back in Ottawa when I used to go and hang around in the press gallery with these guys and so on, because they had all the inside dirt with all the knowledge and so forth. And I made some very good connections then. And I think, in many ways, that was the highlight of my time on Co-op Radio as far as a single event. And it's something that, ironically, I would never have thought of being too terribly interested in, because I'm not very much of an athletic person. I don't follow sports and whatnot. And to have this subject, the gay games, and of course the cultural things that were attached to it, as being the focal point of what I found to be really interesting and riveting in my career at Co-op Radio, had a bit of irony to it. But we had something every day, which was the first time, I think, in Co-op Radio history that there was a special event covered day in and day out for a week. That was a very long week in my life, I'll tell you, but it was an enjoyable week. But in many ways I succeeded, in many ways I didn't. It was the impossible dream, but those are the dreams that are the best things to keep you going. And I've always been very proud of what I did at Co-op Radio in terms of the coming out show. I was asked to become involved in the TV, gay TV that existed at that point in time. And now we're talking about 1990, 1991. There had been, prior to my time, a program called Gablevision, which I'm sure other people will talk to at great length with far more knowledge than I have of it, which had, by the time of the year, by the late 80s, had become defunct. And there was another organization within the gay community called the Pride Community Foundation, which gathered together the resources and the contacts to get to approach the local cable company at the time, which was Rogers, and get a program on air. And they had an hour program which was once a month, was produced once a month and broadcast 4 times within the calendar month. And the name chosen for it, I always thought it was an unfortunate name, but it was Prism, as in a glass with light coming through and the rainbow coming out the other end. And how clever that was, but sometimes when you phoned up people and say, "Hi, I'm from Prism TV," they immediately think prison, which may entice them or excite them, or other times, make them very confused and wary. But anyway, you work with what you got, and the name was Prism. So I had just finished doing the Gay Games was in August of 1990, and I just finished doing that when the chair of the Pride Community Foundation, a man by the name of Malcolm Crane, who had been on my program on many occasions because he was also associated with doing the Pride Parade in those years, so he was on for that and some other issues, approached me and asked me if I would do a TV show, because he was going to be away and they needed somebody to do the September show. So I thought, well, why not? I've never done TV, and might as well try it. I'm glad I was doing that at the time I was, because it was a very pivotal time in the development of the community. It was a time when finally we were getting human rights legislation in place around the country. It was a time when, of course, the AIDS epidemic had, by that point, was at its despairing height, and there was just so much to go, because it's like a society or a community under threat becomes very, very energized, both in its culture, its expression of culture, and its expression of ideas, and even in the clash of wills about what to do about whatever, And that was a great time to be there. I think, it's, I don't, in fact, I don't even envy David and Bill when they were there, because my period was also in exciting times, as was theirs, with the foundation of gay rights and gay community as we now know it, and so on.